Hey everybody, welcome back to Mando Lessons. My name's Baron Collins Hill, but today is another Mando Lessons Masterclass, and we are joined by none other than the most excellent Joe K. Walsh. Joe's a good friend of mine, a fellow Mainer. I remember, must have been 15 plus years ago, I was out at a concert at his in Portland, Maine. He very graciously, I don't know, maybe we had met once before, but he was just like, hey man, get up, pick a tune with us. And got to play some double mandolin, a highlight for me in the early stages of my mandolin playing days. Real grateful to Joe. He's a master of tone and taste. He's got so much going on. I'm gonna let you hear what he has to say. He's got a lot of good knowledge to instill, and he's gonna be talking a lot about triplets and kind of some deep right hand mandolin goodness, as well as how it connects to the left hand, one of my favorite topics. Joe has so much stuff going on in the world of mandolin, whether you want to get a lesson from him. He's got a bunch of courses out there. He also is in a bunch of different amazing groups, playing some incredible and diverse music. I can't begin to cover it all, so I'm going to put a bunch of links in the description where you can follow up and keep up with everything that Joe has going on, and I'm sure he'll also tell you a little bit about it at the end of the workshop. Without further ado, here's Joe K. Walsh to talk all good things mandolin to you.
What's up, folks? It's Joe K. Walsh here being my kitchen in Portland, Maine, and thanks to Baron for inviting me to be part of this. It was an open invitation to talk about anything that I like or have been thinking about, and one thing I've been thinking about recently is triplets and the ways that I have learned to play them and the things that I've learned about playing them. So maybe our time together today will just be an overview of ways that I've learned to play triplets and ways that I've found to use them in creative situations. And so it'll be an overview of a couple different ways. And there's a good place to start is thinking about right hand considerations with triplets. So first of all, a triplet is putting 3 notes in the space of 2. So if I'm playing eighth notes, and then I replace 2 of them with 3, that's a triplet. You can do the same thing with quarter notes and half notes. We're not going to go there today. We're really talking about triplets in streams of eighth notes, or triplets that convey eighth notes, or if you're thinking about it, as some bluegrassers do, as 16ths, that's fine. We're talking about the same thing. And I want to start with a really fundamentally important one, which has all these possibilities contained within it, which is the way I think Sam Bush influenced so many of us to play triplets, which is that he does a lot of triplets where there's a downstroke on the beat, there's a slur, so a slur can include a slide, a hammer-on, a pull-off on the second triplet, and then an upstroke on the third triplet. So this sort of stuff. If you want a really beautiful example with many variations of this idea, you just listen to his solo on Up and Around the Bend on Bela Fleck's record Drive. It's a totally great example. A lot of stuff that he does has become fundamental language for a lot of us. I think you can always tell when somebody's listened to Sam Bush or someone who's listened to a lot of Sam Bush, because this stuff is really an integral part of their language. And so to make it more explicit, if we were doing it in a G scale, I'll put the triplet at the beginning, and I pick the G, hammer it onto A, and I have an upstroke on the B. And what's nice is this version of a triplet can happen without changing your right hand. If your right hand's playing constant eighths, triplets are within that. With that. Now, a reasonable question would be, hey, hold on, why aren't you doing this? Hammer on, hammer on. And there's a place for that, and it's really cool. But one of the beautiful things that comes out of this is that if you get used to this, string crossings aren't an impediment to where you can put a triplet, which is to say, let's say I want to do a triplet from A to B to D. Or I want to do a triplet back from E to C, right? Previously, if I was going to do, that's also a beautiful sound. But in this system, I'm going to do a downstroke on E, a pull off on D, or to D, and then an upstroke on C. And if you get really comfortable with that and you start finding ways to string them together, there could be some explosive stuff that you're familiar with if you listen to like various modern players. There's a really beautiful example of Dominic Leslie taking a solo on Goodbye Liza Jane on Grant Gordy's first record, and he does this run like that. And that's totally based on this idea. So that's kind of an outgrowth of really internalizing this sound. If you want to, very briefly, if you want to work on it, I would suggest working on adding triplets in something where you're also practicing eighth notes so you have a context for what we're talking about. So again, like that sort of thing, you hear the sound we're going for in the context of where we might want to put it. So that's a triplet where we slur the second note. So we pick on the first note and don't pick the second note, and then we pick the third note. We could put the slur on the from the second note to the third note. So and that's a beautiful sound too. You'll hear this sound in like a lot of Theliisms. Like if you listen to O Santo do Povero, I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry to my Galician friends. Anyways, there's the melody in that one. It relies on this idea, and at some point you start to realize a triplet technically is three notes equally spaced out in the space of two, and so simply putting three notes with some rhythm in the space of two doesn't make it a triplet. For example, that doesn't sound like rhythmically like that. And right, if I'm playing eighths and then I subdivide one of those eighths, it's sixteenths. So technically, this is not a triplet. In the bluegrass world, or the quasi-expansive bluegrass world, we call this triplets, and I'm going to keep calling it triplets, even though we all know, and it's important to occasionally remember that it's not actually a triplet. It's an eighth note and two 16th notes in this context. So that's beautiful. You can get a lot of mileage out of that. Another one that we briefly alluded to earlier is the idea of a downstroke, could be an upstroke, and two slurs afterwards. So, like, so that's a beautiful sound, and a lot of language comes out of that. And there's some beautiful language that's in which not having every note picked is an important part of the sound. So cultivating that technique is valuable. I think of like that kind of stuff comes out of this idea with an attack on, could be up or down. And then the easiest place to start would be two hammer-ons on top of that. So that kind of thing. But you could instead of having just two hammer-ons, you could have a slide. So in this case, I'm doing this line that I'm thinking of as starting on E, but of a F major 7. There's our chord. There's our arpeggio. The way it lays out well is to have three notes on the first string, and I'm doing E, F, and A are both going to be hammer-ons, and then I'm going to pick C, and then a hammer-on to E. The last two notes are really not pertinent to our conversation. It's just a nice sound. And that's a cool thing to get under your, in your ear and under your fingers. You can change the intervals and make it work for other chords. So I'm thinking of F major 7 now. Here's A minor 7, D7, etc., etc. A lot of beautiful things that are possible within that. So we've talked about triplets generated using slurs. That's not the only way to do it. Thele would be a very prominent example. Sierra, other people that are kind of in that aesthetic and have that amount of chops. A really early example of that I think undoubtedly influenced Thiele was the famous Mark O'Connor solo on Macedonia from the Strength in Numbers record. And I'll play you a little context. So it's like... So he plays this line. It's in the key of E, more or less. E, F sharp, G sharp, B, B, C sharp, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, A, and then G natural. So a beautiful line, really kind of showed all the, I think everybody else just, oh, that's possible now, and that kind of birthed this other thing that's, turned into a big part of some people's playing. Notably, if you look at that line, Mark played notes that allow you to have a string crossing, upstroke, upstroke. So one thing that makes that more possible at the tempo at which it was played was the fact that he chose language that did not require a downstroke string crossing at that speed. It's much harder. So that's pick triplets and an example of something that came out of that. There's many Thiele examples. I'm sure you can think of one if you listen to much of Thiele. Lastly, there's pick triplets. Speaking of Thiele, there's there's that kind of iconic beginning of, what is it called? Dead Leaves and the Dirty Ground on the How to Grow a Woman from band. I've changed the last voicing, but it's similar to this. So in that context, triplet, the triplet, when a note doesn't change, when we're playing the same note and we want it to be a triplet, there's no left hand trickery, aka there's no slurs get from our left hand that make it possible to avoid picking all three notes. So in that context, with that sound, it really is triplet and then back to eighth notes. So there's no getting around that. But you'll hear lots of beautiful examples of that. It's actually part of the bluegrass aesthetic and lots of other styles. We're not going to go down a big and important rabbit hole of exploring Celtic triplets because that's not something I can really speak to from my experience. But it's a deep and really beautiful thing, and that's comes out of what the last thing we just talked about, those pick triplets. So that would be worth exploring with someone who's not me. But if you do want to check other things out with me, I teach on Peghead Nation. Occasionally I teach private lessons out of my home. I teach at some camps, and I teach at Berklee. And if you just want to hear me not talking and just playing the mandolin, I have a band called Mr. Sun. We just recorded a string band interpretation of Duke Ellington's version of the Nutcracker. I have a trio with a beautiful piano player and a tremendously amazing fiddle player. So the piano player is Jed Wilson and the fiddle player is Ella Jordan. There goes the pick. I have a duo sometimes with Matt Flinner, beautiful mandolin player, and I'm part of the wildly creative Mike Block trio with cello genius Mike Block. So I think that's it. I have a website, joekwalsh.com, and you can also go there by putting in your search bar, theotheroneandonly.com. That'll work. So take care, everybody. Be good.